Welcome everybody to episode 4 of Paths Uncovered. I am really excited this week to have Jill O'Sullivan join me. Jill is a PhD student, which she absolutely hates me exemplifying the whole thing because she thinks it puts her on a pedestal, and I think that's a very deservedly so pedestal to have. I can't talk anymore apparently. But we're really excited to have you here, Jill. Thank you for joining us from Ireland today.
Thanks for having me, Akansha. I do really hate when you're like, everyone, she's a PhD student. I'm like, I'm a first year PhD student. I have a long way to go. I'm just the baby of the PhD students at the moment, but we'll get there. It's fine.
The baby of the PhD students. I like it. It's a great way to put it. But I think not enough people talk about PhDs in terms of actually how to get there, what made the decision to actually choose to go back to college for 4 years, which I'm like, I bow down to you because I could never. I say that knows in the future, but at the moment I could never. But no, for context, let's set the scene of how we know each other, how we all were here where we are today. So do you want to tell us how we met? You can do it. I feel like I talk enough in these things.
Yeah, so we did the same undergrad. We started in math science, which is nearly 7 years ago now, which is terrifying. We met
Definitely didn't realize that.
Yeah, so we met on the very first day of our orientation. I think we were in the same group actually, that when they were showing us around UCC, and we were all very bright-eyed and ready to go and really excited about being in college. That soon faded after the tails.
Like, we don't look it anymore, I'll give it that.
We had very dark circles under our eyes when we left 4 years later, but it's fine. We were all very excited on the first day.
And I'm like fully representing at this stage. Got my UCC
yeah.
Like it really was accidental. I really didn't mean and plan for this, but very glad.
Happy
God, it's great. Exactly where you want to be. I remember, like, I mean, anytime I talk about college at this stage, it's like, by default, obviously all the friends come up because we made, like, I think we were one of those years where it's just like we became friends with everyone in our year, and it just became this kind of whole thing, which didn't seem to happen for a lot of other courses, but we were very lucky with that sense. But I was just like, 4 years of maths, it was hell. But people like Jill got me through. So Jill was very kind in actually going to all her lectures and writing all the notes, and then very nicely sharing those notes for people like me who didn't make all my lectures all the time.
To be fair, I think I did miss a few. I wasn't like one of the ones that was there always, but I was just so like panicked about not having notes that even if I missed a lecture, I found someone that was there and I was like, please let me rewrite these out so I don't miss anything. And then I was like, shared the love with everyone, and was like, you cannot have these two, it's fine.
Share the love.
I'm pretty sure there's like a Google Drive somewhere with just loads of my handwritten notes, and I'm like
that specific drive has gotten many people through the maths degree. Let's just be like, it was a holy grail to have. But right, okay, so I mean, how did you end up in math science, right? Let's kind of go back to start. Like, I know you did maths in school, everyone does maths in school, but what made the decision to actually go do maths as a degree as well?
To be honest, for me, I was one of those students that had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, like literally not a clue. Even after finishing the degree, I still didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. But I really loved maths, and I also really loved like science. So like my favorite subjects in school were like maths, biology, and chemistry. They were like my three favorites. I also really liked accounting because I just got a lot of can't say that word. I just loved like, number crunching and just like making everything like add up, or like solving a formula. I was really sad and just loved it. So I remember going to like a guidance counselor, and I actually never heard of the math science course in UCC, and they were like, you could do this, and then they made it sound really exciting. They were like, you never know what could happen. You could do this course, then do a PhD in maths, and you could be Professor O'Sullivan before you know it. And I was like, I like the sound of that. But I was like, this sounds fancy. But then I was just like, I do really like maths. I was really like torn between doing math science and finance. I kept switching them as like my first option. And then eventually I was like, no, we're going to stick with the math science. We can see how it goes. And like, I can always like change, or I could transfer in first year to a different course, or I could just, there's no harm in like dropping out of college and then starting something else maybe the next year. But yeah, so I just kind of went with the math science, and it kind of worked out. Like I had a bit of I questioned it a lot during the 4 years, mostly because I chose the financial maths route, which like most people picked. I probably should have stayed in like just math science because I did not like the finance side of it. So very glad I didn't pick finance in the end because literally you can probably remember me being like, I'm not taking the accounting modules. Like after first year, I was like, I'm not taking them. I will take like the really hard maths analysis modules. I was like, I don't care. I'm not taking them because I just didn't like them. I hated learning the theory. It was just not for me. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I ended up in math science and financial maths
And I
and stuff.
think I'm really glad you said the part about kind of not really knowing what you wanted to do, but then being okay with the fact that it's like, look, we'll give it a try. And if it doesn't work out, like you can go back and do something else or you can change things. I think
Yeah.
especially like I mean I look back or even I look at like my sister just started college like 2 years ago, right? And I look at them like the pure panic in people like at that age of like I need to make this decision and it needs to be the correct one. Like I'm glad you said that. Like I mean, kind of just don't let anything take it over. But then let's talk about the fact that like I mean, you did end up picking financial maths. Was that, I mean, did you already know in second year that it wasn't really the right decision for you, or was that kind of just it came up as you did more of it and actually started realizing once you had the experience in the kind of course itself, knowing, oh, this isn't it?
It was kind of a bit of both. I suppose in second year, I think in the first semester we took for the first time like financial maths modules, and I like literally I couldn't stand them. I was like these I couldn't retain anything in them. I was like I've no interest in this. And then I remember in second semester, I actually think you might have been in the office with me. We went to see one of our lecturers about getting results, and he was talking about how we were getting on and stuff like that. And I was like, I was like, I don't know, I don't really like the choice of it. And he was kind of discussing options. He was like, he hadn't heard of anyone changing from financial maths into math science after second year, but he said he had heard it the other way around. And he was like, I wouldn't see why you couldn't if you wanted to, but he was saying that if you did, you might have to like repeat the year because there's a lot of modules that the people in pure maths take that financial maths don't, that it would be a lot tougher and you need them for like the modules in third year. And I was like, it's an option, but I had made such good friends and I was like, I don't know if I could get through this course without like these like the eight of us that were really close, and then even again the wider group that were like they were there like, okay, we're all getting through this together, it's fine. But I just couldn't think of going back and having to start again with a new group. And I was like, and I could see all of you like progressing ahead of me. I was like, I don't know, I just don't think this is an option. So then I just kind of started adapting the course to what I liked. So as I said, when you were all taking the accounting and finance modules, I took like extra maths ones or extra like statistics ones because I really liked the kind of like stats side of it, like data analytics, stuff like that, you know, all that. I was like, these are really cool. And I just kind of took extra ones of those just to kind of make it kind of, I don't know, I don't know what the right word is, that I could kind of survive through the course. It's probably not the best word, but like, you know, just kind of get through it and enjoy it as much as I could, even though I wasn't completely like thrilled with the choice I'd made. But it was grand, like, and it was grand because I had all of you and you're all like, we're going to get through this together, and we had so much fun like outside of college that it was like, it's fine, it's going to be fine.
So it all made up for it at the end of the day. And I think, I mean, like you said it yourself, like you adapted the course to fit what you needed and what you wanted out of it. And it's just so important. I mean, God, I genuinely, by the time it got to fourth year, I really, really did just hate everything about it. And I think it was just because I was like, I think I remember, I mean, at the start, I genuinely thought it was going to be an actuary. I was like, yep. Well, before I even started degree, I thought I was going to be a doctor. And I'm like, yes, medicine, that's the way for me. Clearly not. Oh my God, I could not be a doctor. Like now that I look back, I'm like, Jesus Christ, that is not a career for me at all. But like, and then I went to actuary. I'm like, yes, this is going to be it. Like, I'm going to be an actuary. Like, I was so like set in things. And then I started doing actuaries and I was like, no, like I really actually don't enjoy this. Like when we start like all the modules and like actually learning about the work they do. And it's just, I think the course was really, really great in terms of giving us like those little facets of experience in different things, like whether it's the financial stuff. I mean, yeah, like I think I've thought about trying like 6 different careers over college, I'd say. It's like, yeah, actuaries, no. Like, I don't know, investment banking. Like, fully thought that was going to be me for a while. Like, I was like, no, like what is going on? But I mean, by the end of it, I was just so discouraged because I kept being like, is this what I want to do? No, like it just kept being so many no's. But it was good to have at least those pivots, right? I mean, it made sense to try all these different things. And God, yeah, 4 years of that was just so tough. Like I look back to it and it's just like, it's almost like PTSD sometimes from just like,
Yeah.
how did we ever make it through?
Yeah, 100%. And I remember being like, coming out of college and people are like, what are you going to do now? I was like, I don't know, but I have a really long list of things I know I don't want to do. And they're like, but you still don't know what you're going to do. And I was like, I'll figure it out. But I at least I've vetoed some stuff that I'm like, no, this is not for me. And like, I don't know if you remember, but like I was so panicked when we were in fourth year and everyone was applying for like graduate programs and like jobs, and they were all towards the start of fourth year, and I was stressed enough as it was, and I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing, but there's like 5 people behind me in the computer lab doing like these online assessments for interviews, and I was like, I don't want any of these jobs. I like, should I be applying for them? And then literally my mom was like, just don't apply for a job until you know what you want to do. She was like, just get through fourth year. You'll figure it out afterwards. It's fine. Just ignore all those people doing all these interviews and stuff like that. You know you don't want the job. Just leave it off and you'll be fine. But it was serious panic. It was like, all these people are like getting on with their lives. It was first year after college. Like they could change their career like 5 more times in the future. But in my head at the time, I was like, oh, I'm so far behind. Like, I'm never going to get there. But it's fine.
I think it's, oh yeah, I mean, college is weird in that sense of, right? Like you're constantly comparing yourself to every single person, and you can't not do it. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, there's no way you could tell who someone who's 19 years old. Like, I couldn't tell myself that at 19, being like, it doesn't matter what they're doing. Like, it really doesn't at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's such a waste of time at the end of, like, where it's like, nah, this makes no sense. This person's going to do what they're going to do because it works for them. And it'll sort itself out, right? But the other thing that you just said is like, yeah, you came out of college with a long list of things knowing that what you didn't want to do. And I think more people need to look at college as that. Like, it's this 4 years you get of just trying different things. Go do everything. Like, figure out what you don't want. Like, cut off every single thing you can possibly off the list. I'm like, that works really, really well. But, right, okay, so we're in this degree and we're both kind of just trying to figure out what the hell we want to do with our lives. But I think, I mean, it was definitely a lot more different, I think, for you than me, I think, because I was still applying for the jobs, right? I think it was like, I narrowed it down enough to be like, I think I would like these kind of jobs, or just consulting kind of jobs, because it still gave me that whole, it's not a job where it's like a set thing, because consulting, right? It's like changes every other day. So I'm like, hey, at least I get to try like 100 different things, and I'll figure out where I work best, and we'll go from there. But it's good though in terms of like, I mean, you kind of recognize the fact that was just stressing you out in terms of there was no need. You're like, no, I need to cut this bit out, focus on what I have to. So let's talk to like after you've like exams are done. God, that May was a beautiful May when we finally finished college. Had like the best time. Like, oh my God, we're actually like happy again for a little bit. We're just like the freedom of like not having to worry about exams. What happened that summer then for you? So you have now finished the degree. Didn't apply for many jobs. I can't remember. Like, I think you'd applied for a few, but
I applied for 2, and it was actually 2 of them were in the same place. They were just different roles, and I remember doing those 2 interviews, getting one of them, and I was like, all right, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do. But then later on, Tara, another girl that we went to college with, she had applied for. Well, actually, no, it's actually slightly different. So I don't know if you remember it, but when we were in one of our actuarial modules in second semester of our final year, this lecturer came in and talked to us about a master's course in bioinformatics and computational biology. I remember everyone was like, I don't understand why he's in this module looking for actuarial students. But the funny thing is now that guy is now my PhD supervisor. But so yeah, I remember like he was talking and I could look around the room and I was like, no one in this room is interested in this except me. And I remember when he finished talking and he was like, he had like the pamphlets for the master's course. And I was actually sitting next to, I think it was Neve at the time, and she was like, you're going to go down and get one of those, aren't you? And I was like, yes, I am. Because like this seems like it could be a course for me. It was like data analytics mixed with like biology. And I was like, okay, this could be something I'm interested in. And then as the semester went on, I kind of applied for it, but I'd gotten the offer of this job and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the master's. And then Tara also applied for the same master's, and she was like, I don't know, you could like, she was kind of like trying to push me into doing it as well. So like she didn't have to do it by herself. And then we were both in a weird phase because she started working in industry during the summer, and she was like, oh, I might stay on here and not do the masters. And we were all very kind of like, weren't sure. We both got accepted into it, but we were like, will we do it, won't we do it? And then I got offered a scholarship to do the masters, and I was like, oh, that's another kind of push to do it. And I was like, maybe I should. And then my mom actually genuinely sat me down and she was like, right, make a pro con list of the job and the masters. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, she was like, I don't know, I'll just do the job. And she was like, no, do a pro con list. And I was like, I did it. And she was like, Jill, look at the pros for that master's course. And I was like, it's fair enough, I should probably do it. So I ended up actually doing it. And I was like, my mom was like, you don't need the job. Like, I was only, what, just 22 at the time. And she was like, you have time to figure it out. She was like, a load of like your family have gone back as mature students. Like, they didn't have a college degree when they were even your age. So just like, take your time and make sure you know, like, it's what you want to do. So I did the master's course in bioinformatics and computational biology straight after finishing our 4th year. So we finished in May, and then in September I started back in UCC doing this master's course, and it was actually based in the School of Microbiology. So, and I've been there since in that school, which is really random.
But I think, and I mean, I'm glad you took the time to do that. I'm glad like your mum sat you down and did that, right? Because if you hadn't, I mean, I feel like the job was nearly more in terms of, I don't think many people, was there many? And like, it might have just been you and Tara that went back into the masters. There's very few people, like, out of
there was
everybody
one other
in the
person.
course.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So it's like 3 out of like a course of like 40, 50 people who ended up going back and doing a master's. Everybody else got jobs, and you're like, how do you keep straying away from the norm? Like, how, like, it's just so hard to make that decision. And I mean, at least it was summer and you're away from everyone to make that decision. You're like, yes, okay, no, I just got to do it.
Yeah, because I remember I was actually like, I can't remember what happened, but I remember being like really sick that summer. So I was never like out with people. So I didn't have like the like serious FOMO of them all planning moving to Dublin or planning this, that, and the other, and like what they're going to do when they start their jobs. I had like time to think about it. I was like, right, okay, like all of what they're doing sounds really cool, and it sounds like it's going to be great for them. But I know if I did these things, I'd end up in a year's time like probably living in Dublin, probably being miserable in a job I didn't actually really like, and then just trying to be like, what do I do now? I'm stuck here, you know, that kind of stuff. Even though I wouldn't have been, but like that would have been my mindset of like, I can't like get out of this now. This is the road I've taken, you know, that way. So
I mean, it was kind of almost, it sounds like kind of almost like the decision of doing financial maths, right? Like a little bit similar in terms of, okay, I think I'll do this, and then turning around and being like, no, actually, I didn't want this. So I mean, it's like constant decisions happening again. I'm like, at least this time we're like, yep, okay, no, we've chosen the right one. It's fine. Like, we don't have to make too much of an adaptation. Like, you did in the degree, like you made it work for yourself. But hey, at least this is an easier road to getting things to work for yourself. And it's all like, it comes whole, like the whole picture comes back, right? Because you always liked biology and everything that worked together, and it's just everything what you wanted in one place.
Yeah, it did. It made a lot of sense afterwards, which was really funny. I was like, oh, like finally things are starting to make sense, and I'm actually interested in it. Like, because it's really funny, because like when you talk about your jobs, some of it I'm like, oh, this sounds really cool, and then other stuff I'm like, I'm so lost. But stuff sounds familiar because we definitely learned about it in college, but I just retained none of that information because I had no interest in it. Whereas now I'm like, I don't know, because I'm so like my research now is like in the microbiome and like in microbiology. I have like these random facts about like bacteria and their role in diseases and stuff, like just in my brain. I'm like, but I'm also friends with a load of actuaries and like investment bankers that are talking about like, I don't even know anymore. But you know, it still works, which is just really funny. I'm like, we started in the same place, but the information we need for our jobs is just so different. It's mad.
This is kind of why I really wanted to get you onto this as well, just because it's so interesting comparing our careers, because it's like we both started in the exact same place, right? And we've done such complete different things, but are kind of doing the same things at the same time in the way we've ended up in the places we are, right? So, I mean, you're using machine learning in your degree, like as your work and stuff, and I'm like, I do machine learning sometimes too. This is great. The amount of times I've just randomly called you up in the middle of the night, I'm like, hey, Jill, confidence intervals. Can we go back over that again? I can't remember it. Like, you will forever be my statistics person at this stage. I think I'm just like, Jill, please help, like, get me out.
But the funny thing about that is when I talk to you, I like remember everything because I think we use like the same terminology. Whereas if someone asks me in like our office or something like that, they're like, Jill, you would know about this, and then they start explaining it. I'm like, do I? It sounds awfully familiar. And then I'm like, just give me a second. I Google it and I was like, oh, that's what they're on about. Okay, I can explain it now. But I'm like, instantly when I talk to you, I was like, yes, I know what you're on about. And I remember like distinctly, I think it was the confidence intervals conversation. I think actually that was during the day. And I was like just standing in the hallway in the like microbiology department being like, oh, explaining this to you. And my supervisor at the time just walked past being like, she's awfully enthusiastic about confidence intervals in the middle of the corridor. He gave me an awfully funny look and I was like, it's okay. The time difference.
It's for a good cause. It was all for a good cause, and I very much appreciate all of it. And I think it's a really good point though, especially in the data world. Data, statistics, all these kind of, there's just so much terminology for the same things that it's just different for every place, that it's mind-bogglingly hard to like make sure you like. I mean, someone asked me something I can't remember. It wasn't something the other day. It was literally, this is gonna sound awfully stupid now. I know it is, but I remember it was my interview for Telstra Purple, Redify back in the day, and I remember in the interview being asked, they're like, "Oh, have you ever done something like visualizations and stuff?" And I think I just hadn't heard that term specifically for what it meant. So I was like, no, like I don't think I've ever done that. And I'm like later on thinking visual, I'm like, what is that even? And I Google it. It's literally just charts and graphs to showcase data. And I'm like, my whole degree involved doing that. And I just said no because I didn't understand the term. Like what? Like what have I done here? But a lot of that kind of seems to happen, especially in the data world. Sorry, this is such an aside, but like for anyone who feels like they're such an imposter because they don't understand terms, especially in like the data world, please don't. It's just called something else, and you just maybe not have heard of it. It's so fine.
I think it massively depends on your background. Like I feel like people who come from like computer science backgrounds have one terminology, and then they have like people from like maths and stats backgrounds have another, and then they just kind of like clash. They're like talking at each other, and you're like, you're saying the same thing, just using different words.
Exactly.
But they're like, no, this is the terminology. But,
yeah. Okay. So kind of now you've started the degree. So okay, for context for everyone listening, Jill is genuinely a genius. Like she got a 1-1, like a first class honors in the first degree, and then I swear the child was just acing the masters too. You did, please like own it. I love this. Like genuinely one of the smartest people I know. So I mean the masters seemed to be a little bit easier for yourself. Like I feel like you weren't as stressed as you were throughout the 4 years of maths.
No, not at all. It was easier in a sense because the way the masters was aimed, it was kind of like more for biology people, coming from, or yeah, for like people doing like genetics or microbiology or like those kind of courses, and then kind of moving into bioinformatics, so kind of training them up a lot in like math, statistics, computer science, those kind of modules. So they also wanted to recruit people from like a maths background, but I'd say it was kind of easier for us to go into it than say for someone coming from like biology kind of background. So it was a lot of like, again, there was different streams you could go into. So since myself and Tara, who was also a girl in our course who came from maths background, we didn't have to take certain maths and statistics modules. We had to take like introductory modules in like biology and biochemistry, which was really random but also really cool. So they were actually kind of tough for us in just getting our head around all this like terminology and like different methods and stuff like that. Whereas like the kind of computer science stuff that we had to do, since we had the bit of maths, it was kind of maybe easier a small bit for us starting off. Like it still wasn't nowhere like a walk in the park. Like I had to relearn Python, which was a struggle for me massively. I was like, I use R. Can we go back to R, please? But yeah. So I'd say it was a lot less stressful than the 4 years of maths, definitely. But yeah.
Okay. I mean, you're also kind of doing something that you're super interested in at this stage as well. So that definitely plays a part in it, right? I mean, there's definitely things I'm learning at work now. I'm just like, oh my God, I did this in college, but this is so much more interesting now, like than it ever was in college, because the real world context is attached for me. But
Yeah.
so you've done, so you did the math. So so let's say you've graduated the degree, the master's now. I keep saying degree, and then I'm like, nope, there's been too many degrees that you've done to distinguish between them. So you've done the master's now. What led you down the PhD path? So I mean, was there ever the thought that, oh, maybe I'll go work, or what will I do next? Was that kind of questioning bit again?
Yeah, it was a bit, but like not to as big of an extent, to be honest. So when I finished my dissertation, so I did a 4-month research project in the microbiology department. I'm just stuck there now. But so I actually found it really interesting. So it was kind of funny. So we were given like a list of projects to choose from. So I picked mine because from like reading it, it seemed really like kind of like stats based and stuff like that, even though it was like based in microbiology. But I remember starting and I met my supervisor and he was like, look, the way it was meant to work is you were meant to continue on from another student, but they've actually done a lot more than we expected. So we're going to give you like a completely new project. And it had no stats or anything in it. It had like very small bits. There was a lot of like kind of like annotating like sequences of like bacteria and stuff like that, which I'd never done, and using all like these online tools and stuff like that. So I was kind of thrown in the deep end, but it actually turned out really well because it was really interesting. And I was like, okay, I kind of like research. I don't really mind what the topic is, if that makes sense. I'm like, I just kind of like learning about new things. And I remember when I finished, my supervisor was like if you wanted to go in the route, like, I think you'd make a good PhD student. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, I might think about it or whatever. And then I remember a couple of days later, I kind of just emailed him and I was like, look, I'm just going back on what you're saying in the meeting. I just don't really know how to get into a PhD. I'd seen people do them and I knew that it was possible to do them. I'm like, but how do you go about finding one or like getting the funding to do one? So I met him and he was like, the most common way is to kind of just get in touch with supervisors and see if they have projects and see if they have kind of like funding. And then another lecturer who's now my supervisor, he kind of approached me. He was like, look, we have this project if you'd be interested in it. And I was like, yeah, maybe. And he was like, would you be interested in doing a PhD? And I was like, I'm not really sure. So I didn't actually go ahead with the PhD then. I just kind of worked for him for a year. And then we applied to this PhD program, which was run slightly differently. So, and I think it kind of suits me better. So I'm actually like part of one of the SFI's CRT programs, so like Center for Research Training. So they set up this thing where they fund different areas of like research in kind of like tech and kind of IT, that kind of stuff. So it's in genomic data science, but the way it works is that you don't start off like going in applying for a particular project. There's like 20 to 30 of you recruited every year in like a cohort, and then you're given like a list of projects to pick from. You pick one and then you do that, but you're still part of this cohort the entire time you're doing your PhD. So there's like 27 other students in the same position as me in like the different university around in Ireland. So we're all still kind of connected and we have that like support network of like being in a course but still doing a PhD on our own, which definitely I think suits me better because you're like, I'm not in a room by myself for the next 4 years just trying to pump out research topics, you know, that kind of way. So yeah, that's kind of why I kind of decided to go ahead with this kind of route, because I was like, okay, I'm not by myself. I have the other people under that are doing work with my supervisor, but I also have all these other students that are in the same position as me, and we're going to get through this together in the next 4 years, which was definitely a better choice for me, I think, rather than just finding a project and working on that for the next few years, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's a very clear theme right throughout the whole thing of needing a support system, and it's not that you're special, you need it. It's not. It's like humans need it. Like, God, we would not. I mean, there's no way we would have gotten through math had we not had all of the people around us. And it's just, I mean, I don't like. It's just so hard doing some of these things without it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, the one thing I loved about college is that. So I studied in college a lot. Like, I didn't study at home ever, So I was always in like a lab, and like the best thing about it is like I could turn around and bounce questions off like 5 different people, and then it would start a discussion, and you're like, okay, I've definitely a better idea what's going on now. So, and I learned more that way. Like
Yeah.
I learned in a way that I like when I'm chatting to other people, or if I'm like writing stuff down, working it out, that's the way I learn. Whereas if I have someone just talking at me for an hour, I will retain nothing, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I definitely need that kind of like group work, bouncing ideas off people, working things out for myself then at the same time, just to like learn anything, and then just also be like, am I on the right track? Like I'm not
Yeah.
completely off base here,
This
like
is
that kind of way.
this is so funny because I never even realized that this is what has led me to being who I am now in terms of, so at work, they're all, I mean, yeah, with consulting, right, you're kind of thrown into the deep end of a project. And you're like, here you go, solve it. We need this thing solved. This is what we've got. And so Midge, it was a colleague at work who was in the data team as well. And the amount of times I would literally just come like, hey, I just need to talk at you. Please just listen. And we'll end up sitting in a room and I'm just like explaining the problem. And as I'm going, just talking about it, I'll figure out where the problem is, or he'll say something like that. I'm like, I never realized it was because of college. Like that's how that habit got ingrained in me. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I literally do that. I call people up. I'm like, you just need to listen to me rant about this, and I will get a solution out of just ranting about this. Please let me just talk. But that's,
Yeah.
oh, it's so important, I think. And I'm like, oh, but right. The question I have though is like, I mean, I look at PhDs, right? It's just such a like completely different world. And I mean, it's like we just never had that exposure. I think I definitely didn't see that exposure in college of, oh, this could be a career path forward. Like, I mean, I know, okay, everyone kind of knows that, like, yeah, you can do a master's, you can do PhDs, but it just seemed really inaccessible to me anyway, right? I'm like, I don't know how much of this more I can take. So how was that experience actually kind of taking that deep dive or like trying to learn more? Like, what did you do around that?
So yeah, like I was completely the
Sorry.
same. I remember thinking when we were in fourth year, I was like, oh, like, because I remember one or two people in maths had applied for PhDs and they got them and they were going to be starting off like the next year. And I was like, how did they find these things? Do you know, that kind of way? I'm like, I've no idea how to get into this. And I was like, it would be really interesting. But the one thing is that I found that really kind of helped me like decide to go do this is like doing a PhD is nothing like being in college. Like you don't go to lectures unless you want to. Like I think most PhD programs in Ireland you have to do about like 15 to 30 credits, which is what we would do in a semester, but you can do it over the 3 to 4 years that you're doing
Okay.
it. So like you take an odd lecture here and there. So like the way I was actually talking to someone recently and they're like PhD students aren't really students. They're treated more like staff in Ireland anyway. So you're
Yeah.
somewhere in between. So what I do every day is I have like my project and I work in it like all day, every day. And I'm just trying out new things while also like reading papers. Whereas I'm taking no modules this year, so I don't have to go to a lecture. And then on top of that, I do some like teaching or demonstrating. So I'm not in that role of like I have to go to this student or this lecture at this time and I have an assignment due then. I'm just like I work away as if I have a job, if that makes sense. Because I
Mm-hmm.
remember actually there was a postdoc that I worked with before and she was like, what are you going to do after this? And I was like, I don't know, I might see about the PhD route. Or I was like, or I might get like kind of joking, I was like, I might get like a proper job. And she was like, a PhD is a job. It's probably not a very well paid one, but it's still a job. Like the way you do things, like it's not like being an undergrad or doing like a taught master's, which is what I did. Whereas like a research master's or like a PhD are very different. So that kind of got me through of like, okay, I won't be stressed about. It's still quite stressful in certain cases, but like you're not constantly worrying about like getting this assignment in at this time or that or whatever. Like there is the stress of like, okay, I need to come up with something to get published or this, that, and the other. But it's not like constant. Every like 2 days, some other lecturer comes at you with like another assignment. So it is a bit different in that way. So that kind of was
Okay.
like, okay, this is not going to be the same as like the 4 years. Because a lot of people that it's actually funny, I've heard a few talks recently and they're like, I wasn't the best student like in my undergrad, but they had all gone on to do PhDs. They were like, I think it was just when they were like let kind of loose in a sense of like I can do my own thing and like bounce my ideas off people rather than have someone like you need to learn this to pass this exam kind of a thing. It's different, which is kind of good. So that kind of way. And you can kind of like
yeah.
veer it to what you want to do. Like if you've really strong ideas and you've a pretty good supervisor, they'll be like, yeah, I think you should like look into this and see if there's anything interesting there, kind of a thing, which is it's kind of fun. You're like, I have this idea, and they're like, okay, let's go see if it's any good. Go.
Let's go experiment with everything.
They're, as long as it's within the like reasonable bounds of your PhD project, they're like, yeah, I think it'd be interesting to look into this, in that kind of way. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely stressful.
I mean, like, I'm reiterating that it is still stressful, please.
in some scenarios, like you could go weeks of being like, this is so fun, and then you're given a deadline, you're like, oh, right, okay, I need to get serious and pump this out right now. Do you know what I mean? It's a good mix. It's fine though. It'll be good, hopefully.
That's an interesting. No, it's a good way of explaining it, because I definitely don't think. Well, I guess I'm not really going around talking to too many PhD people, but I'd never heard of it put into that perspective, and it does make sense. Like, it is just basically like a job. Here's a problem, go solve it. Like, it sounds great. Kind of almost similar to consulting in that sense of, I mean, we're never really going around trying to find problems. We're just, here's problems, please solve them. Like, please help. How do we get around this kind of thing? So it's interesting how like our paths are like just so parallel in terms of they're very similar, but just a little bit different at all times almost. But do you want to talk a bit about the work you're actually kind of doing at the moment in terms of the techie bits, like, because that's more show off a little bit.
So the kind of work that I'm hoping that I'll be able to do during my PhD is so I'm still in the School of Microbiology, so I'll be working with kind of improving how we use machine learning for like microbiome research. So microbiome data can be like really hard to work with because of the way it is. Like it's just like I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. It's just it doesn't follow a lot of like the standard, like, so when you're applying like a statistical model, you're like, I have all these assumptions, and you're like, oh, I have nice data, so they will follow all these things. It does not follow the majority of the assumptions. So you have to kind of like figure out like ways that you're like, okay, can I use this on this data for it to make sense? And then as well, we're kind of interested in like, okay, so you can generate like data from someone's microbiome, but you can also then like get, we call it omics data, so you can get different kind of like genetic data from a human as well, and you can use that to see how they kind of interact and how they might their interaction might play a role in, like, I don't know, if you have a disease or you don't, or if you like respond to a certain treatment or you don't, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of seeing if we can like apply machine learning to these kind of like multi-omic settings, is what we like would be the term used, and see if we can then use that to kind of like help like classify like different outcomes and stuff like that, is kind of what I'm looking at, which is kind of interesting. Or like just see if we can just improve how we apply different methods to microbiome data. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. It does. So essentially what you're trying to say is just the fact that there's a lot of data about your own body, and you're trying to classify things in terms of, hey, if you have this, does this lead to this kind of a disease, or does this prevent these kind of things? Like really identifying those, but with using machine learning attached to it. Yeah,
so it's like if we look at, say, a particular disease, and then you're like, okay, if you take like samples from persons that have this disease, then you take samples from people who are like just healthy, and we collect the same information, and like based on the like mixture of microbiome and then like the host omics data, if I can like look at different combinations of them, can I figure out who's who, if that makes sense? So that kind of thing is stuff we're looking at, and using just like, and see if we can use like machine learning to like improve that. And the one thing is, and the other thing that's really like hard is because it's kind of like I suppose in your sense, I don't really know the kind of projects you're working on, but you probably have like loads of data, loads of like samples and observations, whereas like for us, we're really limited to who we can recruit into studies. So we're always like, we have a tiny sample size, but we can generate like thousands and thousands of like features in terms of like what their genetic data is like. I'm like, how do I use this to make this any like way logical? It's really kind of difficult, but I'm hoping that I will be able to do something with it in the next 4 years and be like, I learned something that's useful.
No, I mean, even just that little tidbit sounds like there's already so much you've obviously gotten to a stage of being understanding all these different parts of it anyway, that I'm like, miles ahead than most. I'll give you that.
I seem like I understand. Whether I can actually get it to work is another story, but I'm getting there. I'm hoping anyway. But yes.
Oh no, I mean that sounds like just every time I talk to you about the work you're doing, it's just I'm always just like amazed by it all, and I feel like you're shocked every time that I am amazed. I'm just like it's just such cool work, and I'm like Jill, you're like too far ingrained in this to actually like I feel like you don't even hear how amazing it sounds sometimes. But
Yeah.
no, I'm very like it's just so cool. I think I'm so glad we shared all this.
Thanks. I think mostly it's because like when you're in something, all you see is what's going wrong, rather than what like you like. I'll be there and I'll be staring at my results. I'm like, oh, I'm not getting anything interesting. But I'm also like, they're also like, but that's a result in itself, even though it's not a good one. And they're like,
Yeah.
so you're still making progress. You're like, okay, we won't do it this way. But I'm like, but it's still gone wrong. Like, I'm not getting anything good. And they're like, no, it's fine. Like,
I mean,
no result is still a result.
You can compare this exactly to the way college, right? I mean, you got all these no's in terms of you don't want to do all these things. There was a result at the end. Okay, you've ended up doing the correct thing. Like, surely there will be a solution at the end of this tunnel. Like, I'm very, very optimistic. Like, I know what you can do, and you'll be great. But so, I mean, I'm so glad we talked about this because it's just interesting to hear a completely different pathway, especially because you are still doing it very much like it's a career in data and biology, bioinformatics. I can never remember the correct terms for this.
Yeah.
But it's such a different path into it that not a lot of people will focus or ever talk about. So I'm really glad that you came around to talk about it.
Like, unless you're like in the industry of like you work for, I don't know, a genomics company, or like you work in this area in like academia or whatever, not many people hear about it. But the other thing is that like I may do this for the next 4 years, but like when I come out of it, there's no saying that I won't just go into like a data science role like you're in now and not ever look at the biology side again, if that makes sense. I'm not saying I will, but like there's still loads of options of like still very much a data science course, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So no, it's important. I think there's always going to be so many skills you'll end up picking up, doesn't matter what they are, right? And it's me and Kim kind of mentioned this where we mentioned even like working in retail. Like retail gives you so many transferable skills into everything. Like just communicating to people, like consulting, 80% of consulting is just being able to talk to other people. And retail gives all that kind of skills and being able to do that. And the same thing will go, right? I mean, you'll pick up so many different skills that you'll have careers and career options everywhere in front of you. So I'm like excited to talk to you in like 3 years time when you're like back to having to make those decisions again, where it's like, right, what do I do next? Will I ever leave college? Will Jill ever leave UCC? We don't know, but like you might just become a lecturer and like literally this is it, UCC for life.
Hopefully I might change university eventually if I decide to stay in academia. I feel like that would be a good thing for my CV, but you never know. But yeah, I've actually no idea, because I remember being asked that before I started. They're like what do you see yourself doing, like if you got into this and you like what would you do afterwards? And I was like, I have no idea. Like it kind of depends how it goes. In 2 years I could end up hating it and want to leave. But then again, I could also want to stay in academia for the rest of my life, or else I could end up in industry. Like, I don't know. It's all very much up in the air. I could go back and just do something else completely different. You never know.
I mean, I've now started kind of as a kid, like, you know, those whole like, oh, what will you be when you grow up? Or even the question of like, oh, what's your 5-year plan? Or where do you want to be in 5 years? And like, I've genuinely started to hate that question because I'm like, I can't. It's the experiences that I go through every day, the little decisions you make, that's going to form where you'll be in 5 years. And you cannot predict those anymore. Like, you just can't. There's too many variations happening in the world to be like, that's what I'll do in 5 years. Who knows?
Yeah, I actually got asked that question in the interview for the PhD program, and they're like, what, like, I think they actually said 10 years, and I was just, I think they saw the panic in my face. And so she kind of redirected, she's like, what do you want to get out of this course? But I was kind of thinking of like 5 years ago, I thought I was dropping out of a math science course because I didn't like it, and I was like, or else I might just get it done and become a secondary school teacher and teach maths for the rest of my life, you know. Whereas now I'm in a PhD looking at based in a microbiology department looking at different types of genetic data. I'm like, I don't understand how I've got here, but I'm here. I've made some segments.
I've made it this far.
Oh, it's
No,
actually
okay.
hilarious.
I think that is kind of slowly becoming a redundant question of 5 years time, 10 years time. Those have slowly started becoming redundant. I'm like, nah, the
You can
world's
ask that.
far too variable now. Like, none of
Yeah.
that.
You can change your career so many times that you're like, I don't know. I could lose interest in this and get a really random interest in something else and decide to pursue that career instead. You never know, like.
Which, I mean, I would be happy for you to do that because then you get to come back and tell me all about that decision and how that all went. But like that's kind of how this whole podcast came around, right? It's like people make these crazy decisions, and more people should be making these kind of decisions of no, actually, I'm gonna call it here. This is not what I want to do anymore. I want to do something completely different. And the more representation we get on those kind of things, the better. There might be people listening who are like, PhD actually sounds not too bad. I might go back to it. I don't think I can do that right now, but I'm sure there'll be other people who might listen and be like, this doesn't sound too bad anymore.
Yeah, I think it's like it massively depends on how you approach the PhD as well. Like, though I know there's definitely people that like do PhDs and they do like I don't know 80 hours a week of like just like constant like I need to get this done to pump out this paper. Whereas I'm like I'm gonna see how it goes. I'm gonna work hard, but I'm also not gonna sacrifice my like social life as well to do this to get this degree. I'm like I kind of after because that's the kind of attitude I had when I was in doing our undergrad. I was like I need to be here to like get this and get these grades and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like I'm not doing that to myself anymore. I don't know if that's going to be good or bad, but
I think it's good. I mean, yeah, no, it's good. It makes me feel a little bit less worried sometimes, where I'm just like, yes, okay, Jill's looking after herself. This is good. It's important. Those kind of things are very important. But
yeah,
look,
100%.
we might wrap it up there just because I know it's kind of getting close enough to the time that we said we'll try and time box this. Probably gone over it, but I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you actually decided to do this. I know you were a little bit iffy about doing it and coming along, but I hope you've had a good time.
Yeah, I've had a really good time. I was actually like quite scared doing this. I was like, I don't have an impressive career like the other the other people you've had on, but yeah, no, it's actually been really fun. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, I think that's kind of the point of this, right? Everyone's career journey doesn't matter what it was, if it's super like typical for what that career should look like, or really atypical, completely different. But I think you've got such random different things in there, and it makes sense. And I think I love the fact that it's just like it's so interesting to see how the two of us have gone the same ways and done the same things and might end up doing the exact same job in the exact same place at some stage, but have gone completely different paths to get there. So it's been a great time, and we shall leave it there.
Okay.
So that was Jill O'Sullivan sharing her journey into a PhD pathway while pursuing machine learning and data science on the side as well, all while making decisions that seem to be kind of well out of the norm of the people around her. Join us again in 2 weeks' time for another episode of Paths Uncovered.